What's up, horror lovers? Today, we're cracking open one of the darkest cold cases in history. A tale of isolated terror, ghostly warnings, and a farm that turned into a slaughterhouse. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck, a quiet Bavarian homestead that became the stage for a massacre so gruesome it still haunts Germany over a century later. 6 people were butchered with a mattock. But the real horror? The killer might have lived in the house for days after. Let's unravel this nightmare, one shadow at a time. 6 months before the blood spilled, the atmosphere at Hinterkaifeck had already turned rotten. The maid, Crescens Rieger, fled the farm, white as a sheet. Why? She said the attic whispered to her. Footsteps above. Voices. Things that shouldn't be there. Haunted, she muttered before running. And it didn't stop there. Andreas Gruber, the old patriarch, found a newspaper on the property from Munich. But no one in the village subscribed. No one delivered it. The forest, it seemed, had begun delivering its own messages. In late March 1922, things escalated from creepy to chilling. Gruber discovered footprints in the snow leading from the woods straight to his barn, but none going back. The lock on the machine house had been busted. That night, they all heard footsteps in the attic again. But when Gruber searched, nothing, just silence and shadows. Still, he refused help. Maybe he thought ghosts were easier than people. Meanwhile, young Kazilia told her school friend a terrifying secret. Her mother had tried to run away after a fight, but was found in the woods and dragged back. On March 31st, the new maid Maria Baumgartner arrived. She'd last less than 24 hours. That night, one by one, the family was lured into the barn, lured like livestock. Victoria, her daughter Kazilia, then Andreas and his wife, each one slaughtered with a mattock, skulls crushed, faces caved in. Then the killer turned to the house. Baby Joseph was killed in his cradle, Maria in her bed. It wasn't rage. It was something worse. It was calm, deliberate, surgical. Days passed. The killer didn't flee. In fact, he might have made himself comfortable. On April 1st, 2 coffee salesmen knocked, no answer. The gate to the machine house was open, but they left, spooked. The animals were fed. The dog barked from inside the barn. It was as if the farm was still alive, almost normal. Except its heart had stopped beating days ago. No one went to church. The girl didn't show at school. And no one saw the family again until it was too late. On April 4th, a mechanic named Hoffner arrived to fix an engine. He waited, worked for hours, still nothing. That same afternoon, Lorenz Schlittenbauer sent his sons to check. When they returned with empty eyes, he went himself with 2 neighbors. Inside the barn, they found hell. The bodies were stacked like meat. Victoria, Andreas, little Kazilia with tufts of her own hair ripped out. In the house, Maria bloody, Joseph broken. The silence that followed was deafening. The investigation was a disaster. Curious villagers trampled through the crime scene, cooked meals, moved the dead. Autopsies were done in the barn. The weapon was gone, but the wound screamed mattock. The little girl had survived for hours, mutilated but breathing. The killer didn't just take lives. He watched them end. Money was untouched. Robbery wasn't the motive. Whoever did this stayed, ate their food, slept in their beds, fed the animals, like he'd always lived there. The suspects, everyone, and no one. Traveling tradesmen, local enemies, jealous lovers, all questioned, all released. No arrests stuck. Years passed. Files piled up. The police gave up. But stories didn't stop. One villager swore he saw smoke from the chimney the night of the murders. Said it smelled like something other than wood was burning. And a shadowy figure blinded him with a lantern. But the police? They didn't care. They were chasing phantoms. Or maybe they were covering for one. There were whispers of strangers in the woods. On April 1st, a farmer spotted 2 men watching from the tree line. When they noticed him, they turned their faces and slipped away. 5 years later, a drifter approached a local, claiming out of the blue, "I did it." Then vanished into the forest. Maybe a madman, maybe the real killer, still playing with his food. The thing about evil is, it doesn't need a reason. Sometimes, it just wants to be remembered. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. But what if the monster wasn't some outsider? What if it was someone inside all along? Someone who lived in the attic? Someone who moved in before the blood? Someone who never left? The footsteps, the newspaper, the whispering cold. What happened at Hinterkaifeck isn't just a crime. It's a warning. When your house starts talking, maybe, just maybe listen, before the silence comes back and brings company. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into one of Germany's oldest and most bone-chilling legends. A ghost draped in sorrow, soaked in centuries of guilt, and whispering death with every silent step. This is the tale of the Weiss Frau, the White Lady. You might think you've heard every haunted castle story, but this one? It's been leaving noble bloodlines in coffins since the freaking Middle Ages. Picture a pale woman with long, ghostly hair, dressed in a white gown that floats like fog. She doesn't scream. She doesn't chase. She just appears, watching, weeping, and wherever she's seen, death follows, like a curse passed down through royal veins. Her most infamous origin is tied to Countess Kunigunde von Orlemund, a name that still sends shivers through German nobility. She was young, filthy rich, and recently widowed in the 1300s, not one to stay lonely. Kunigunde fell for Albrecht the Handsome, a royal heartthrob from the powerful Hohenzollern dynasty. Albrecht allegedly told her, "If it weren't for the 4 eyes between us, I could marry you." Now, any sane person might have guessed he meant his disapproving parents. But Kunigunde? She heard something else entirely. She thought he meant her children. And that's when things took a turn from romance to ritual sacrifice, driven by a twisted interpretation of love and a blinding desire to be accepted. Kunigunde did the unthinkable. One stormy night, she crept into her children's room, 2 innocent little ones, and, with a needle used for tapestry, gouged out their eyes while they slept. A slow, silent horror. A mother's betrayal. The floor was soaked in red and regret. She confessed the next day to a priest, probably hoping for salvation. Instead, she was cast into a convent, sentenced to a life of endless penance. But the walls couldn't hold back her guilt. Legend says that every night, especially during storms, she saw her children staring back at her from the shadows. The years rolled by, but Kunigunde's torment didn't end with her death. Instead, it multiplied. Her soul, now cursed, started appearing in Hohenzollern castles, first in Plassenburg, then Bayreuth, Kulmbach, and finally the Berliner Schloss. Always in white, always when lightning ripped the sky apart. Witnesses described her gliding down hallways, or staring out windows with a candle in her hand, waiting for something. Some said she cried. Others claimed she just stood there, as still as a statue. But no matter the variation, the pattern remained chillingly consistent. Someone in the family died shortly after. In 1914, on the brink of World War I, she showed up again, this time in the Berlin castle. Servants whispered about the white figure flickering in the halls. Days later, a nobleman from the Hohenzollern bloodline dropped dead. Coincidence? Maybe. But historians who've tracked her appearances swear by the timeline. It's as if the ghost herself keeps watch over the family, marking their death certificates with silent visits. Some even believe she chooses who's next. And here's where it gets even creepier. Some say the White Lady weeps not because she's mourning, but because she died crying. The storms? Just echoes of her eternal grief. Rainwater dripping from castle roofs is her sorrow seeping through the cracks of time. It's believed that when the rain hits heavy and thunder rolls, she's strongest, able to cross from her cursed plane into ours. Not to harm, not to help, just to haunt. Skeptics have tried to debunk her tale, claiming it's just aristocratic superstition or a metaphor for generational trauma. But that doesn't explain the dozens of documented sightings by people with nothing to gain. Guards, servants, even historians. They all describe the same figure, the same chill, the same silence before death. Some castles even stopped hosting guests during heavy rain. Too many nobles feared becoming the White Lady's next target. Imagine living in one of those castles, knowing that any night she might show up at your door, dressed in white, holding a candle, and then, within days, your name gets etched into a tombstone. That's not just a ghost story. That's a family curse sculpted in centuries of blood and broken hearts. She's not just a spirit. She's a legacy of guilt, a monument to a crime that echoes across dynasties. So next time you hear thunder and see a flash outside your window, maybe don't go check. Maybe keep the curtains shut, especially if you see a woman in white standing still, watching, because she's not lost. She knows exactly where she is. And if she's near you, you might want to update your will. You want a final thought? Here it is. Love can drive people to do unspeakable things. But when that love is warped by obsession and guilt, it doesn't just ruin lives, it curses bloodlines. The White Lady is more than a ghost. She's a warning, stitched into the very fabric of German legend. Never turn love into a weapon, because ghosts hold grudges forever. We're heading deep into the haunted woods of Lower Saxony, Germany, where fog blankets the trees and ancient legends refuse to die. Nestled between the villages of Bad Grund and Wildman lies a sinkhole so ominous. Locals simply call it Teufelsloch, the Devil's Hole. For centuries, people whispered that on stormy nights, this gaping wound in the earth becomes a gateway to something else, something foul. And if you think that's just some spooky bedtime story, wait till you hear what happened to one brave fool who dared to test it. They say when the rain falls and thunder rumbles, the Devil's Hole bubbles like a cauldron. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen shadows twisting through the fog, shapes that didn't move like animals or people. According to ancient tales, if you stand too close, something in the mist might notice you, might reach out, might drag you into a world where sunlight doesn't exist. The villagers never got too close, especially when the clouds rolled in. But in 1784, a stubborn 22-year-old miner named Eric Baumann had other plans. Eric wasn't just curious, he was angry. Tired of being mocked by his peers for believing in silly folktales, he decided to put the village's favorite horror story to rest. If the devil's down there, he said, I'll look him right in the eyes. Armed with nothing but a rusted lantern and a length of rope, he set off into the woods one October night, the rain slicing sideways through the trees. People watched his flickering light disappear between the trunks, some praying silently, others betting he'd be back by morning. But Eric never returned. The search began at dawn. After 3 full days, villagers combed through the dripping forest, calling his name. Then they found it, his shattered lantern, still reeking of oil, and one of his gloves, torn and soaked in mud, lying at the very edge of the Devil's Hole. But the real kicker? The water inside the pit wasn't calm. It frothed and hissed like a boiling kettle. Foam rose to the surface, stained brown and reeking of sulfur, like something was alive down there and had just eaten. Yeah, that part was never in the folk tales. Now here's where things get worse. According to one farmer, his cows refused to drink from the stream that flowed near the hole for weeks afterward. Birds avoided the area. And the dreams? People living near the forest reported seeing Eric, or something that looked like him, standing at their windows. He'd be soaked pale, with black sludge dripping from his eyes, just staring, never blinking, never speaking, just watching. Some folks moved away. Others nailed their shutters shut. Over the years, more dared to approach the Devil's Hole. Some just to peek in. Others to leave offerings, flowers, bones, even a doll or two. But everyone who got too close said the same thing. The air near the pit felt wrong. Heavy metallic, like breathing in rust. A few swore they heard whispering, in a language no one could place, and they weren't alone. One teenager claimed he was pushed from behind, but no one was there. Still think Eric just got lost? In 1906, a team of German naturalists tried to map the sinkhole. They lowered a camera, expecting maybe 50 meters of depth. The cable ran out at 300, but instead of rock or water, the camera recorded black. Not darkness, just a void, as if the hole had no bottom at all. The footage was confiscated. The lead researcher left town 2 days later and was never heard from again. His assistant, institutionalized within the month. Today, the Devil's Hole is fenced off, but the fence doesn't keep things out. It keeps things in. The trees around it have grown twisted, gnarled like claws reaching up from the ground. Locals say that if you listen closely on a rainy night, you can still hear Eric calling out, begging for help. Or worse, laughing. Like whatever took him now wears his face. A warning for the curious. The devil doesn't always take your soul. Sometimes, he just borrows your body. So next time you find yourself deep in the woods during a storm, and you spot a strange pit bubbling with foul foam, walk away. Because the next shadow you see in the mist might not just be watching. It might be waiting, hungry,